For centuries, official history has presented us with only one face of Christianity, a set of dogmas and rituals controlled by powerful institutions. But what if this were just the surface of something far deeper? Ancient records, hidden manuscripts, and enigmatic symbols suggest that Jesus imparted secret teachings to an inner circle of disciples, knowledge so revolutionary that it was systematically erased from official history. What would happen if we rediscovered these hidden teachings today? Teachings that could completely transform our understanding of spirituality, human consciousness, and our true divine potential. Why did Jesus speak in codes? Why did he say that only some could understand his words? In Matthew chapter 10, verse 13, he reveals something unsettling. To you it has been given to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not. This statement clearly suggests that there were two levels of teaching, one for the crowds and another, deeper one, reserved only for those spiritually prepared. The canonical Gospels show a Jesus who spoke in parables, simple stories with moral lessons. But historical records indicate that, in private, away from the eyes of the crowd, he shared far deeper knowledge with his closest disciples. As the Gospel of Mark chapter 4, verse 34 states, he did not speak to them without a parable, but privately to his disciples he explained everything. What exactly did he explain in those private sessions that could not be openly revealed? The discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls in 1947 and the Nag Hammadi Library brought to light astonishing evidence that there existed a Christian esoteric tradition hidden for centuries. These texts present a Jesus very different from the one we know through the official Bible, a spiritual master who taught techniques of self-knowledge and the transformation of consciousness. In the Gospel of Thomas, one of the texts found at Nag Hammadi, Jesus declares, "If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you." This enigmatic passage suggests that the path to salvation lies not in external rituals or dogmas, but in an inner process of self-discovery and spiritual awakening. Could it be that Jesus was transmitting initiatory knowledge similar to that of the ancient mystery schools of Egypt, Greece, and the Middle East? Many scholars believe so. These schools taught that enlightenment was a gradual process of consciousness transformation, where the initiate passed through stages of purification until achieving direct understanding of divine reality. Wouldn't this be the true message of Christ that was later distorted? During the period known as the lost years of Jesus' life, the interval between his childhood and the start of his public ministry, the canonical Gospels remain silent. Where was Jesus during this time? What did he learn? Some theories suggest he might have traveled to Egypt, Persia, or even India, absorbing teachings from ancient spiritual traditions that he later incorporated into his own message. The Essenes, a mystical Jewish community living in isolation in the Judean desert, practiced purification rituals and taught about the immortality of the soul. The Dead Sea Scrolls reveal that they believed in the coming of a Messiah who would bring superior knowledge to humanity. Was Jesus an initiate of this esoteric tradition? Did he receive training in these hidden circles before beginning his public mission? If these hypotheses are true, then original Christianity was far more than a religion of blind faith and submission to dogmas. It was an esoteric path to the transformation of consciousness. This would explain why Jesus often said that only those with eyes to see and ears to hear would understand his message. It wasn't a matter of intelligence, but of spiritual readiness to receive knowledge that couldn't be grasped by the ordinary mind. But then the big question arises: why did the official church reject these teachings? The answer may lie in the power this wisdom granted to the individual. If true spirituality comes from within, if each person can directly access the divine without intermediaries, then religious structures lose their role as mediators between humanity and God. It's no surprise that only the Gospels reinforcing a religious hierarchy were preserved, while texts emphasizing individual empowerment were banned. What if these hidden teachings contained truths so transformative that they could completely change how we understand our existence and our spiritual potential? What happened to this knowledge after Jesus' death? Was there a secret lineage of disciples who continued to pass down these mysteries, far from the eyes of the official church? If Jesus' hidden teachings contained truths so profound that they could revolutionize our understanding of spirituality, who were the ones responsible for preserving them through the centuries? Historical clues point to the existence of a select group of disciples who received this knowledge directly from the Master and protected it through the ages. But who were these individuals really, And why has almost no one heard of the mysterious Brotherhood of Light? History reveals that Christianity spread rapidly after Jesus' death, but few know that different interpretations of his message circulated simultaneously. While the official church solidified as an institution, lesser-known groups maintained a more mystical and esoteric tradition, passed down exclusively to initiates prepared to receive such knowledge. Among these groups, fascinating accounts emerge of a secret brotherhood tasked with preserving Christ's deepest teachings. If we turn our attention to Jesus' time, we find subtle references to this possible lineage of initiates. In the Gospel of Mark chapter 4, verse 34, there's a revealing detail that many readers overlook. He did not speak to them without a parable, but privately to his disciples he explained everything. This passage raises an intriguing question. What exactly did Jesus reveal to his closest disciples, away from the ears of the crowds? Was this the sacred knowledge that the Brotherhood of Light strove to preserve through the centuries that followed? The Gnostics, one of the earliest Christian currents, held a view that directly opposed the doctrine that would later become official. For them, true salvation came not from blind faith or obedience to religious precepts, but from gnosis, the inner knowledge, the direct illumination of the mind and soul. This understanding posed a real threat to the emerging church's authority, as it placed the power of spiritual connection directly in the individual's hands, without the need for intermediaries. The Essenes, an ancient Jewish sect that inhabited the Judean desert even before Christ's birth, practiced purification rituals, believed in the imminent arrival of a Messiah, and passed down esoteric knowledge reserved only for initiates. Many contemporary researchers suggest that Jesus might have been trained by them, absorbing meditation techniques and spiritual practices that he later incorporated into his own secret teachings. But how did this brotherhood manage to keep its knowledge alive in the face of relentless persecution through the centuries? The answer may lie in the secret societies that emerged in different historical periods. The Knights Templar, the Cathedrals, the Rosicrucians, and even some branches of Freemasonry may have safeguarded fragments of this hidden wisdom, passing it from generation to generation through symbols, rituals, and codes undecipherable to the uninitiated. The Cathars, for example, were a medieval Christian group that openly rejected the dogmas of the Church of Rome. They believed that the kingdom of God was not a physical place, but a state of consciousness accessible within every human being. This view cost them dearly. They were brutally persecuted by the Inquisition and nearly completely wiped out in the 13th century. However, before their fall, historical records suggest that some of their leaders escaped, taking with them sacred manuscripts and knowledge that could not fall into their persecutors' hands. The Knights Templar, that famous medieval military and religious order, may have uncovered secret manuscripts about Jesus during their expeditions to the Middle East. Many historians speculate that, during excavations they conducted at the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, the Templars found ancient documents containing startling revelations about Christ and his hidden teachings. The order was accused of heresy and virtually annihilated in 1307, but there are signs that some members managed to escape, carrying with them knowledge that remained carefully concealed. The Rosicrucians, who emerged in the 17th century, also claimed to possess an ancestral spiritual wisdom, a secret heritage supposedly tracing back to Christ's time. Their doctrine spoke of inner illumination, consciousness transformation, and the need to keep certain teachings in absolute secrecy. Could they not be direct or indirect heirs of the Brotherhood of Light? Why would this brotherhood have remained in the shadows for so long? The most likely explanation lies in the revolutionary impact this knowledge would have if widely revealed. If Jesus' secret message came fully into the light, the entire power structure of the church could be irrevocably shaken. After all, if the kingdom of God is within each of us, as the Gnostics and Cathars taught, then there is no real need for a religious hierarchy to mediate that connection with the divine. If Jesus' hidden teachings had the power to transform human consciousness and free individuals from the limitations of the material world, why were they so methodically erased from history? The answer lies in a silent conflict that unfolded in the first 300 years after Jesus' death, a true war between those who sought to preserve this ancient wisdom and those who desired at all costs to control and suppress it. In the first 300 years after Jesus' death, Christianity was astonishingly diverse. There were countless currents interpreting his message in radically different ways, each with its own practices and understandings. The Gnostics, for instance, championed a revolutionary view. They believed Jesus taught a path of inner enlightenment, where each person could awaken to their true divine essence. For them, salvation came not from blind faith or submission to dogmas, but from gnosis, the direct, experiential knowledge of spiritual truth. This liberating vision soon became a serious problem for those who wanted to establish an institutionalized, hierarchical Christianity. In the 4th century, Emperor Constantine, recognizing Christianity's potential as a political tool to unify his fragile empire, made a decision that would forever alter the course of Western spirituality. In 325 after Christ, he convened the famous Council of Nicaea, a historic event that officially established which interpretations would be accepted as orthodox and which would be condemned as heresy. It was at this council that the Church rigidly defined which teachings would be incorporated into official doctrine and which would be banned. Gospels that mentioned a Jesus transmitting secret knowledge were systematically rejected. Gnostic texts, such as the Gospel of Thomas and the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, were declared heretical and sentenced to destruction. The revolutionary idea that every human could directly access divine truth was replaced by an authoritarian clerical structure, where only bishops and priests would have the right to interpret God's will. The Gnostics were mercilessly persecuted. Their sacred texts were burned in public squares, their leaders were exiled or executed, and their communities were scattered. The message was clear: any version of Christianity that didn't align with the official church would be silenced at any cost. Yet, despite this relentless persecution, some manuscripts miraculously survived, preserved by devotees who risked their lives to protect them. In the 20th century, humanity received 2 archaeological discoveries that would revolutionize our understanding of early Christianity. In 1947, the Dead Sea Scrolls were found by a Bedouin shepherd in caves near Qumran, in Judea. Years later, in 1945, a collection of Gnostic texts was discovered buried in ceramic jars near Nag Hammadi, in Egypt. These finds brought to light striking fragments of this forbidden wisdom, revealing that original Christianity was far more diverse and profound than we were led to believe for centuries. But the persecution didn't stop at the early centuries. In the 13th century, a group known as the Cathars gained strength in southern France. They believed the material world was an illusion created by negative forces, and that the true kingdom of God was an inner reality accessible to all people. They categorically rejected the authority of the Church of Rome and asserted that any individual, regardless of social position, could directly achieve spiritual enlightenment. This view posed a direct and uncompromising threat to the medieval church's power. In 1209, Pope Innocent III declared a crusade against the Cathars, launching one of the most brutal and bloody persecutions in Christian history. Thousands of men, women, and children were massacred without mercy. In 1244, the last Cathar stronghold, Montségur, finally fell after months of siege. Hundreds of Cathars were burned alive in a massive pyre at the foot of the mountain. Yet, before Montségur's final fall, historical accounts suggest that the last guardians of Cathar knowledge managed to escape during the night, taking with them sacred manuscripts and esoteric secrets that could never be destroyed. What exactly did this spiritual treasure contain that justified such sacrifice to preserve it? The Inquisition, formally established in the 13th century, became another powerful tool to silence any teaching that challenged official doctrine. Books were systematically burned, philosophers and mystics were tortured and executed, and anyone daring to question ecclesiastical authority was immediately accused of heresy. Among the persecuted were not only the heirs of Gnosticism but also the Templars, the Rosicrucians, and the early alchemists, all potential guardians of fragments of this forbidden knowledge. But why did the institutional church so desperately need to erase these teachings? The answer lies in social and spiritual control. If people discovered they didn't need intermediaries to connect with the divine, the entire hierarchical structure of the church would lose its raison d'etre. If each individual could directly access spiritual truth through self-knowledge and meditation, priests, dogmas, and rituals would become superfluous. There's a fascinating historical detail. Many concepts violently banned by the church kept resurfacing in different secret societies over the centuries. Freemasonry, the Rosicrucians, and even certain Templar orders that survived in secrecy preserved fragments of this ancient knowledge, passing it down through carefully encoded initiatory rituals. In many of these esoteric groups, we find recurring references to the lost word, the inner light, and the need to awaken consciousness to achieve true enlightenment. If Jesus' hidden teachings were persecuted, banned, and systematically erased from official history, did they truly disappear? Or do vestiges of this ancient wisdom still exist, waiting to be rediscovered by those who have eyes to see and ears to hear? The truth is that sacred knowledge can never be completely destroyed. It hides in the subtext of ancient writings, in the enigmatic symbols carved into Gothic cathedrals, and even in spiritual traditions that managed to survive the Church's rigorous censorship. But where exactly can we find these mysteries today? What are the visible signs of this underground current of wisdom that withstood centuries of persecution? The first and most obvious clue lies in the apocryphal Gospels, texts deliberately excluded from the biblical canon but offering a radically different view of Jesus and his teachings. The Gospel of Thomas, for instance, doesn't focus on narrating stories of miracles or messianic prophecies, but presents a series of profound statements attributed directly to the Master. In one of the most striking passages of this forbidden text, Jesus clearly states, "The kingdom of God is within you and all around you. When you know yourselves, then you will be known, and you will understand that you are children of the living God." This revolutionary assertion suggests that true spiritual enlightenment comes not from external rituals or imposed dogmas, but from a deep process of self-knowledge and self-discovery. Isn't it fascinating how this view aligns perfectly with Eastern traditions like Buddhism and Hinduism, which for millennia have taught that salvation is essentially an inner awakening of consciousness? Another surprising source of clues is the Dead Sea Scrolls, discovered in 1947 in the caves of Qumran. These ancient texts, written by the Essene community, describe advanced spiritual practices including meditation, ritual fasting, and purification ceremonies designed to elevate consciousness to higher states. Some passages suggest that Jesus may have had direct contact with these mystical groups and incorporated parts of their ancestral wisdom into his own esoteric teachings. But what if this knowledge weren't preserved only in ancient texts? What if it had been carefully passed down through secret orders across countless generations? The Knights Templar, that mysterious military and religious order that emerged in the 12th century, may have had access to forbidden manuscripts revealing Christ's deepest mysteries. During their presence in Jerusalem, excavations at the Temple Mount might have brought the Templars into contact with Gnostic and Essene texts hidden from religious authorities. Despite being brutally persecuted and officially dissolved in 1312 under charges of heresy, strong historical evidence suggests that some knights escaped, taking with them not only material treasures but, more importantly, a treasure of spiritual knowledge that could never be revealed to the uninitiated world. What exactly did the Templars know that posed such a threat to the established power? Centuries later, another enigmatic society emerged in Europe, the Rosicrucians. In their manifestos published in the early 17th century, they claimed to possess hidden knowledge about the true nature of reality, transmitted through an unbroken lineage of initiates. Their doctrines explicitly spoke of a cosmic Christ, not as a historical figure limited by time and space, but as a universal divine principle accessible to all who awaken to their true inner nature. Freemasonry, in turn, incorporated into its rituals symbols and allegories directly tied to ancient esoteric traditions. Many of its ceremonies speak of the quest for light and the symbolic resurrection of the initiate, concepts that seem directly linked to the hidden teachings attributed to Jesus. Could Freemasonry be a modern manifestation of the ancient Brotherhood of Light, disguised under new names and forms to survive in times of persecution? Perhaps the most extraordinary possibility is that these teachings might be hidden in plain sight. The esoteric symbolism in the Gothic architecture of Europe's great cathedrals, the intricate geometric patterns in medieval stained glass, and even certain seemingly encoded passages in the Bible itself may contain clues carefully planted for those who have developed the discernment to recognize them. Contemporary researchers have discovered that many cathedrals were built following precise mathematical proportions derived from what's called sacred geometry, a system of knowledge the ancients believed revealed the fundamental patterns of divine creation. The Cathedral of Chartres, in France for example, contains labyrinths, sculptures, and stained glass that seem to communicate, through symbols, teachings about consciousness transformation and mystical union with the divine. Even in Renaissance art, especially in the works of masters like Leonardo da Vinci, we can find veiled symbols and references suggesting esoteric knowledge passed down only among initiates. The famous fresco, The Last Supper, contains elements that have been interpreted as possible codes related to the deeper Christian mysteries, those that couldn't be openly revealed in an era of strict ecclesiastical control. What if this ancestral wisdom weren't confined to ancient manuscripts or secret orders? What if the true knowledge of Christ were still alive and accessible within every human being? The esoteric teachings attributed to Jesus always pointed in the same fundamental direction: self-knowledge and the elevation of consciousness as the path to spiritual realization. This means that anyone genuinely committed to this inner quest could potentially access this transcendent truth without the need for religious hierarchies or institutional intermediaries. As Christ himself is said to have stated, according to the Gospel of Thomas, "Whoever drinks from my mouth will become like me. I myself will become him, and the hidden things will be revealed to him." But this quest demands far more than just reading ancient books or studying esoteric symbols. It requires practical experience, inner transformation, and, above all, the courage to question established truths. Are we truly ready to rediscover these mysteries, even if it means re-examining everything we thought we knew about Jesus, Christianity, and our own spiritual nature? If Jesus' esoteric teachings were so profound and transformative, why were they deliberately suppressed from official Christian history? Why did so many die trying to preserve them? The answer to these questions leads us to one of the most fascinating conspiracies in human history. A conspiracy driven not just by political power, but by control over human consciousness itself. In the first centuries after Jesus' death, Christianity was extraordinarily diverse, with different groups interpreting his teachings in distinct ways. The Gnostics, in particular, championed a revolutionary view that each person could directly access the divine through self-knowledge, without need of intermediaries. For them, Jesus wasn't an external savior rescuing sinners, but a guide showing the path to inner enlightenment that every human could walk for themselves. This interpretation posed a direct and uncompromising threat to the power of the emerging religious authorities. If every individual could find the divine within themselves, what need would there be for priests, bishops, or even an institutional church? If salvation came from inner knowledge rather than obedience to dogmas, how could the masses be controlled and directed? This liberating perspective stood in direct conflict with the interests of those seeking to establish a rigid hierarchical structure. The turning point came in the 4th century, when Emperor Constantine decided to use Christianity as a tool for political unification of the Roman Empire. For this strategy to work, it was essential to have a single, official version of the faith, tightly controlled by a central authority. At the Council of Nicaea, in 325 after Christ, bishops were pressured to define a unified creed, rejecting all alternative interpretations as heresies. This marked the beginning of the systematic suppression of Gnostic Christianity and all esoteric teachings attributed to Jesus. Texts speaking of self-knowledge, inner awakening, and the divine nature inherent in every human were declared heretical and condemned to destruction. The concept of an external God, a stern judge demanding absolute obedience to ecclesiastical authority, became the official doctrine, replacing the view of a divinity that could be found within each person. But control over spiritual knowledge went far beyond theological disputes. It had profound political and social implications. The Gnostic assertion that all humans are equal in their divine essence, regardless of gender or social status, was far too revolutionary for a rigidly hierarchical society. Gnostic writings often gave prominent roles to female figures like Mary Magdalene, suggesting a spiritual equality that directly contradicted the patriarchal values of the time. Another crucial factor explains the relentless persecution of esoteric teachings, the transformative power of direct mystical experience. When a person directly experiences spiritual reality without intermediaries, they become less susceptible to manipulation and imposed dogmas. Mystics from all traditions have always been viewed with suspicion by institutional religious authorities precisely because their direct experience of the divine transcends the limitations of official doctrines. Gnostic texts emphasized practical techniques for expanding consciousness, meditation, contemplation, dream work, and sacred visualizations. These practices, similar to those found in Eastern traditions like Buddhism and Hinduism, allowed practitioners to transcend the limitations of the ordinary mind and access heightened states of perception. The institutional church, by contrast, shifted the focus to external rituals, standardized prayers, and unquestioning obedience to clerical authority. Esoteric knowledge also included understandings of latent human powers that contradicted the official view of humanity as inherently sinful, dependent solely on divine grace dispensed by the Church. The Gnostics spoke of extraordinary potentials dormant in every person, potentials that, once awakened, bestowed abilities that would seem miraculous to ordinary eyes. Jesus is said to have declared, according to the Gospel of Thomas, "He who seeks must not stop until he finds. When he finds, he will be troubled. When he is troubled, he will marvel, and he will reign over all." The persecutions of those bearing this knowledge were brutal and systematic. The Cathars, for instance, were nearly eradicated in the crusade launched against them in the 13th century. During the siege of the Montségur fortress, when asked how to distinguish heretics from the faithful, the papal legate allegedly replied, "Kill them all. God will know his own." This chilling phrase reveals the relentless determination to eradicate any trace of esoteric knowledge. The Templars, who may have accessed ancient manuscripts during their time in Jerusalem, were accused of heresy, tortured to confess imaginary crimes, and finally suppressed in 1312. Their properties were confiscated, and their last Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, was burned alive in Paris. The charges against them included worshipping a mysterious head and engaging in secret rituals, possibly distorted references to initiatory practices derived from esoteric Christian teachings. The Inquisition, formally established in the 13th century, became a terrifyingly efficient machine for identifying and eliminating anyone suspected of holding forbidden knowledge. Philosophers, alchemists, healers, and mystics were persecuted, tortured, and often executed. Entire libraries were burned, destroying priceless treasures of ancestral wisdom. Mere possession of certain books was considered sufficient evidence of heresy. Even during the Renaissance and the modern age, when thought began to break free from rigid ecclesiastical control, those who ventured to explore esoteric mysteries still faced grave dangers. Giordano Bruno, who taught a spiritual cosmology derived in part from Hermetic and Gnostic traditions, was burned alive in 1600. His final words, addressed to the judges who condemned him, were, "You have more fear in pronouncing my sentence than I have in receiving it." The efforts to suppress this knowledge were so systematic and sweeping that they nearly succeeded in erasing it entirely from collective memory. Were it not for archaeological discoveries like the Nag Hammadi texts and the Dead Sea Scrolls, we might never have accessed these fragments of the Christian esoteric tradition. Even so, what has survived likely represents only a fraction of the vast body of teachings that once existed. Yet, despite centuries of persecution, this knowledge never fully vanished. Like an underground stream, it continued to flow through secret societies, alchemical traditions, mystical systems like Kabbalah and Sufism, and even certain expressions of art and literature. The truth, as Jesus himself said, cannot be permanently hidden. There is nothing covered that will not be revealed, nor daylight, nor hidden that will not be known. We now reach the crux of this journey. If these hidden teachings truly existed and were so systematically persecuted, are they still accessible today? How could someone sincerely interested in uncovering these truths find them? And, most importantly, what would this rediscovery mean for our understanding of Christianity and our own spiritual potential? We live in an extraordinary era of human history. After centuries of censorship and persecution, treasures of spiritual knowledge that remained hidden are finally coming to light. The discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls in 1947 and the Nag Hammadi Library in 1945 revealed texts hidden for nearly 2,000 years. Independent researchers, free from the institutional constraints of past eras, can now examine these sources and reconstruct fragments of the Christian esoteric tradition that was deliberately suppressed. On the internet, texts once accessible only to specialized scholars or members of secret societies are now available to anyone interested. The Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Philip, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, and dozens of other apocryphal texts can be read, studied, and compared with the canonical Gospels. This democratization of knowledge represents an unprecedented opportunity to rediscover the esoteric dimension of Jesus' teachings. But written texts are just the beginning. The contemplative practices that formed the core of the Christian mysteries are also being gradually recovered. Meditation, visualization, and contemplative prayer techniques dating back to the earliest Christian communities are being rediscovered and practiced by people seeking a more direct and experiential connection with the divine. The contemporary Christian contemplative movement, though rarely acknowledging its Gnostic roots, is effectively reviving many practices that were part of the original esoteric tradition. Curiously, the growing dialogue between Christianity and Eastern spiritual traditions like Buddhism and Hinduism is helping recover elements of Jesus' esoteric teachings. Christian mystics like Thomas Merton and Bede Griffiths discovered profound similarities between Christian contemplative teachings and Eastern meditative practices. These convergences suggest that, beyond cultural and terminological differences, there exists a perennial wisdom transcending religious boundaries, preserved more openly in Eastern traditions than in the West. The study of sacred geometry and esoteric symbolism in Gothic cathedrals is also revealing layers of meaning hidden for centuries. Researchers have found that these magnificent structures were not just places of worship but books in stone, encoding esoteric knowledge about cosmic harmony, divine proportions, and the process of spiritual transformation. The Cathedral of Chartres, for instance, incorporates mathematical principles in its design that reflect the universe's order and the soul's journey back to the divine source. Some contemporary traditions claim to have preserved direct lineages of Christian esoteric teachings. The Martinists, modern Rosicrucians, and certain branches of theosophy assert connections to the original Gnostic tradition. While it's difficult to historically verify these claims of unbroken continuity, many of their teachings show striking parallels with the Gnostic texts discovered at Nag Hammadi. Yet perhaps the most significant rediscovery is the realization that the Christian mysteries were never primarily about secret information or hidden doctrines. They were fundamentally about consciousness transformation. The true esoteric teaching of Jesus, as the Gnostic texts suggest, was not a set of beliefs to be accepted, but an experiential process of awakening to our true nature. As he is said to have stated in the Gospel of Thomas, "If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you." This transformative perspective offers a radically different view of the purpose of spiritual life. It's not about obeying external rules for rewards in the afterlife, but a process of self-knowledge that reveals our true identity as children of the living God. Christian esoteric wisdom suggests that every human has the potential to realize the same Christ consciousness Jesus fully embodied, not through external imitation, but through an inner awakening to the divinity already present within us. In light of this renewed understanding, many of Jesus' enigmatic words in the canonical Gospels gain surprising clarity. When he says, "I and the Father are one," or "the kingdom of heaven is within you," he isn't making claims of exclusive divinity, but pointing to a reality potentially accessible to all humans. His parables and metaphors weren't mere moral lessons, but tools to awaken a deeper understanding of reality beyond the limits of conventional thought. The rediscovery of these teachings has profound implications for the modern world. In an era of ecological crisis, social polarization, and spiritual disillusionment, the integrative vision of the Christian mysteries offers a path of reconnection with our own divine essence, with other humans, and with the earth. The Gnostic understanding that all creation is a manifestation of the divine could ground an ethic of reverence for life and the planet, sorely needed in our times. The veil that for centuries hid Jesus' deepest teachings is gradually lifting. Archaeological discoveries, academic advances, and the information freedom of the digital age are allowing this knowledge to emerge after nearly 2,000 years of obscurity. What we find is not just a historical curiosity, but a vibrant spiritual tradition that can transform our understanding of Christianity and our own divine potential. Those with the courage to question official narratives and seek beyond the surface of conventional doctrines can rediscover a spiritual treasure of inestimable value, a path of inner transformation that reconnects us with our true nature and the sacred mystery permeating all existence. If you're interested in exploring more about spirituality, I've specially selected some videos for you, filled with profound knowledge and fascinating discoveries you'll love. Just click on one of them. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to continue this journey of self-discovery and spiritual learning. Your commitment to knowledge is the first step to transforming your reality.